Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Today we are joined for our April recruiting update by Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. So before we get to Steve, let's get it started with a few of my thoughts. Spring football concluded on Saturday with a scrimmage. Now, many fans were not even aware there was going to be any kind of scrimmage or game to finish spring practice, but there was. Some family members were allowed to watch, and really, that was it. So did we learn anything about this team from spring practice? Not much, really. There was access to the coaching staff and some players off and on during spring ball, but nothing new in the way of information. For one, I'm okay with that. Spring ball really is for the development of young players, working on fundamentals, installing schemes, and competing for playing time. Based on our 2-4 season, we need plenty of all of that. Next ball on the playing field is really all that matters. Spring ball isn't for the fans. It's nice when we get to take in the spring game, but it's really for the team. My guest today says we are now 18 months into pandemic recruiting. Nothing has been normal. Kids are being recruited by phone and Zoom calls. Not ideal, and hopefully that will change soon. Up next with our April recruiting update and much more on this week's edition of The Michigan Man is Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. So stay with us. Here with us on our game day segment to get a recruiting update is Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. Great to have you back with us, Steve.
Thanks, Mike. Always good to be on.
Well, let's start, if we could, by reviewing, just for those out there who have been having a hard time keeping up with recruiting, the actual hard commits that we have as of today. Let's start with Marvin Klein. He's a tight end. Big kid, 6'6", 215 pounds, from Cologne, Germany. Your thoughts on him, Steve?
So Michigan, I feel like, at tight end has followed a pretty similar pattern every cycle. They seem to get a kid committed really early on that they love, and they try to go for a second guy to kind of complement, and they have a hard time with it. Klein is that first guy they got that they loved. Michigan was, credit to Sharon Moore, Jay Harbaugh, two of the best evaluators on the staff. I want to say Michigan was like the second or third offer for Klein, and really I think the first one that was like noteworthy. I think Akron or somebody was his first offer. He ended up getting Georgia, some other really good offers. He's kind of a high ceiling type prospect. Long ways to go on the field as far as like the game. You know, like not a guy I think will come in and make an impact right away. I think tight end's kind of a hard spot to make an impact freshman year either way.
Yeah. High
ceiling kid, definitely more of a pass catching style tight end than the hand down. I mean, he's going to have to learn how to put his hand down and block either way, but his true assets are in the passing game. He reportedly, and these are, you never know with this stuff, reportedly ran somewhere near a 4.5 at some event. It was not a Nike or Under Armour event where it could be verified, but he also has been excelling on the track this offseason. Like, I believe, so he did have a season, because I think he's playing in North Carolina this year. I don't know, he was playing somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. The town he was in, Raybun Gap. Yeah, I mean, it's like in the middle of nowhere. And I think he decided to play. So it was some confusing situation. I remember I talked to him. He said he was playing it, but it wasn't waiting until the spring. It was going to be like in the middle. It was a weird thing. But either way, you know, with Jay Harbaugh taking over at tight end, sometimes different position coaches maybe like other guys more. But no, Klein's a kid Michigan loves. They're excited. You know, no indication that he's listening to other schools or anything like that, because he's been committed for quite a while already, so you never know that type of stuff. With visits now tentatively scheduled to open up on June 1st, no indication anybody else is looking to get him up on campus or that he's interested there. So, again, a nice first tight end to have committed to allow them to go after some other guys.
I know we're not the only school recruiting some of these German football players. What's up that they're ending up over here going to high school? Is that part of a developmental program?
So a guy named Brandon Collier, and I can't remember the name of it. It's the group that he runs, but I know a few years ago, Barton Simmons, who now is the his title is the general manager for actual Vanderbilt football, was our director of scouting, actually went over to Europe to this event, and it was run by a guy named Brandon Collier. I can't remember the name. It's like PPI Recruits or something.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these guys have now made it over to the States. There's a kid actually in the 22 class named Hero Canoe, defensive tackle, playing in Southern California, who is now blowing up as a recruit. Klein also had connections to Bjorn Warner, who played for Florida State. That was another reason that he came over here. But there is like an influx of guys, and Brandon Collier is kind of the main driver behind that if anyone wants to look him up and look up that group. But Klein, actually, funny enough, I think one of the reasons he felt comfortable at Michigan was his experience in talking to Julius Welschoff about his experience at Michigan. Welschoff had told him that University of Michigan, the weather, the climate, and just the actual Ann Arbor, he said it kind of reminded him of Germany a little bit. It was as close to, that's the way he explained it to him. But I think that was one of the reasons, after he had come up and visited on his own, because Klein was one of the kids that did come up on his own last year, did sort of a self-guided visit and did meet with a couple current players, Welschoff obviously being one. That's one of the reasons he ended up feeling comfortable enough to commit to Michigan. Like I said, that the fact they were one of the first offers already had piqued his interest. They were recruiting him really hard, but then he got up there, met with Welschoff, got a feel for Ann Arbor, and made the commitment. So, yeah, I mean, it is one of those things. If there is a kid in this Canoe, he's out of Southern California. I'm not quite sure he's a top target, but he's pretty high up there. Little ace up your sleeve, I suppose. I mean, it can't hurt, to have kids from your home country, not just there, but liking it and being comfortable there. So, yeah, it's been interesting. Barton's aim of that original trip, not to get too far off topic, was to kind of get a feel for these young European prospects, because they're not getting any real looks just playing in their home country, right? I mean, So he went and kind of did the whole deal where they did measurables, they had guys run drills, gave them some real numbers that like colleges could look at and say, okay, now we know what this guy is capable of physically. We can kind of go from here. That was one of the reasons Michigan recruited Welschoff originally, was some workout videos he did, but also Barton's trip also really kind of highlighted some of these kids and really gave them some concrete data to kind of go off of. So yeah, it's pretty cool deal. But yeah, it's really expanded. There's a lot of kids that have European ties that are being recruited way more than there ever were, even like 6 or 7 years ago.
Well, another kid we have in the fold is a big defensive tackle, Devontae Miles, 6'5", 275. What can you tell us about him?
I'm committed to the last defensive staff, right? He committed to Don Brown. Granted, Sean Newell was the primary either way, but was also a guy that Don Brown seemed to be high on. I think Michigan, the new staff has been pretty straightforward with him. I think they like him. I think there's some improvements that they want to see him make on the field. Which again, this is just something that always happens when you're changing staff. I mean, just different staffs have different views on different players, but we know more than anyone, they need bodies in the middle, whether they're running a 3-4 or 4-3 or whatever. They need interior linemen. Miles has a lot of versatility to me, similar to, I don't think he's quite at the level of player that Rayshawn Benny was last cycle, but similar in that he can move inside and outside depending on what they're trying to run. So he has value in that regard. And honestly, like River Rouge they're kind of building a legit, I know they've had success on the field, but they're also like, there's a lot of young D1 guys that are going to be coming through there the next few years. So there is that about maybe trying to build a pipeline into that program a little bit. So yeah, Miles is a guy. Yeah, it's kind of a swing guy, defensive end, defensive tackle, really a good player in my opinion. Be really interested to see if he attends any off-season camps this off-season, or what his senior film looks like next year.
And as far as offensive linemen go, I think we just have the one commit, offensive tackle, Connor Jones, 6'7", 285-pound kid. Talk about him.
So he's all in. Another guy, he committed to Ed Warner before Warner left, but this is one where it feels like Sharon Moore, Grant Newsome, who is pretty much the assistant, one of the top GAs or assistant guys they have on the offensive staff now, really seem to like him. And a guy I think will try to enroll early. Colorado, actually, Michigan's after like 3 or 4 offensive linemen in Colorado this cycle, and they've kind of consistently gone out there. They had Reese Atterbury a couple cycles ago, Chris Fox back in the way back in the day, but they've also targeted a lot of guys in that area, throughout the cycles and stuff. And it seems like Colorado puts out like a decent amount of good offensive linemen. I know a guy named I think he's Denver Broncos offensive lineman, Matt McChesney. McChesney runs a big offensive lineman. It's called 6-0 Strength. He actually trained Chris Fox back in 2013. He's still working with guys. He works with Connor Jones. He works with George Fitzpatrick, who's another top target for Michigan this cycle up front. And he works with Braden Miller, I believe, who's also a kid in Colorado that Michigan is recruiting at offensive tackle. So Jones is a product of that camp and is a kid, like I said. Another one I'm interested to see how his senior film looks, or if he attends any camps this year. I'm not going to say he's a 4-star prospect. I don't know if he's an 84, which is where we have him right now. I think that's pretty low. I think Michigan thinks more highly of him than that. So, but again, a kid that even through the transition, with the staff members and stuff, feels like a kid they still really like and that they eventually want to sign.
We've learned over the years you can never have enough defensive backs, and we've got Cody Jones committed, 5'11", 180 pounds, and I've seen a little bit of him on tape. He looks good.
I like Cody Jones a lot. He was in what was interesting. Now, they had Taylor Groves from Tennessee also committed, who decommitted. There have been fans have kind of had this vision of what Michigan's defensive back class was going to look like this cycle, and was interesting when those two kids committed. They committed on the same day. Those two were not guys that people even thought of at that point because the last staff didn't even recruit them. I mean, these are guys that Mo Linguist offered and then committed like 2 weeks later, right? I mean, it was so fast. And Cody Jones is a guy that you look at and think, okay, like perfect, because like I know we'll be talking about their other defensive back commitment here in a minute, but more of a nickel, shorter but super, super athletic. He's a kid to me. I think he's a guy that they'll get up to campus and see, because I think he has the ability to play offense at the college level also. I suspect he'll play defense, but I think he's capable of playing offense. So, one of those recruits where I think guys like this are so valuable because they can still kind of recruit similar size and style defensive backs because this kid is good enough to where maybe if they don't get all the receivers they want or something, let's say, this is a guy you can, like I said, you can get up there, you can put him in both units, check, kind of get a better feel for his game at a more firsthand basis and kind of move him around. That being said, I know the 7-on-7 event that our guys just went and covered where he was there, he looked really, really good in coverage and looks like a guy that, again, 4-star prospect out of Memphis, not an area Michigan really gets many guys, right? I mean, I couldn't remember the last time they got a kid out of Memphis, and but like I said, to me, quietly a pretty valuable member of this class, just because where he's from, because they are hitting Tennessee pretty hard this cycle, and B, just because of that versatility. You can never have enough of those types of guys, in my opinion.
The other defensive back that we were all just couldn't wait to sign, or commit, I should say, cornerback Will Johnson. He's a legacy out of Grosse Pointe, 6'3", 190, big-time player. There was a lot of angst that he might, head to Columbus or maybe somewhere else, but what a big get he was.
He's really was the number one guy. I think that if there was a guy that you had to get, it was him, right? I mean, because of everything you just said. Not only is he a legacy, not only is he a 5-star prospect, but Ohio State was kind of the other program, which is what you would do if you're Ohio State.
Yeah.
The kid's clearly good enough to play there. Why not try to take Michigan's number one target out of their backyard? Like a kid whose dad played at Michigan, loves Michigan. That would have been such a terrible blow, if that's the way that it had gone. But no, can't say enough about Will's abilities. Size of a safety, but the ability of a cornerback, really depending on how things shake out for them in the defensive backfield, unless a couple guys step up. I mean, he's somebody who could play year one, almost no doubt. There's obviously the value in that too, because they signed Jaden McBurrows in 21. That's it at corner. Right? I mean, there's nobody else. And I love McBurrows. I actually think he's going to play and be a good player for Michigan, but they desperately need defensive backs this cycle. And, I think that it's one of those things at the end of the day, it's going to help them get a couple guys because it's not just a talking point for them to say, hey, you could come in and play early. Like, they really could tell a kid, like, you're going to have a really good chance to play right away if you come here, you know? And so I think that might have been part of the appeal. Obviously, like I said, there's the other appeals. He's a legacy. Now he's kind of the face of that class. You know, he's that guy who's been working hard on like other guys that are recruiting, you know, to try to get them to join, that type of stuff. So, you know, really a guy that you'll look back later. This one won't be like, I always kind of looked at El Hadi last cycle. Like, he was a top 100 offensive lineman, committed like 2 years before signing day. People never really included him when they talked about big recruiting wins because he just committed to Michigan so fast and whatever. But like, to have a 5-star kid committed in your class that early who's passionately trying to recruit for you, you can't, like, those don't come around that often. So a lot of value in that regard too. But biggest thing is, yeah, he's a great player. Another versatile player, but really a guy who's going to play corner and who's going to play fast in Michigan.
Well, the last of the 6 commitments that we have right now, as far as I know, is wide receiver Tayshaun Trent. Big kid, 6'4", 205 pounds. It's that big body receiver everyone likes.
So with Trent, I'm interested to see how he grows physically between now and his senior year. To me, he looks like, and I think he could definitely play wide receiver. He's obviously capable. I just think this is the type of guy, if he embraced the idea of playing tight end, could be a force at the position. I think this is an opinion, and there's not really I don't know if there's a lot of fact rooted in this or not. I think there are a lot of kids that size that are so bent on playing wide receiver and don't see the opportunity at tight end. I always think of first guy I always think of is Mark Andrews, who plays now as one of the best tight ends in the NFL for the Baltimore Ravens. He ended up playing at Oklahoma. Michigan was recruiting him really hard. The reason he committed to Oklahoma was because Oklahoma told him he'd play wide receiver, which was a lie. Like, no, just speak factually. It was BS, because Michigan at the time, I think it was Hoke, they had said, hey, like, if you come in and play tight end, you will play in the NFL someday. Nope. Not interested. I'm a wide receiver. So Oklahoma gets him, whatever, ends up All-American. I don't know if he won the Mackey Award or not, but either way, now one of the best tight ends in the NFL. So I was thinking guys like Trent or guys like Malik Carr a couple years ago at Oak Park, you know, is another guy that just screams tight end to me. You know, it'll be up to him at the end of the day, but I just think he's got the body side, the type, and the ability to just be a nightmare at the tight end position if he embraced it. So I don't know. To be honest, I don't even know if Michigan has talked about that with him or not. That's just what I know. I think it. I know a couple other guys on our site sort of feel the same way. But yeah, kind of your classic right now, red zone, you know, high point the ball, throw it up and grab it. He's a good basketball player too. You know, maybe a little inconsistent with the hands, but that's, I think that's correctable. I think he's got really big hands. Like, those are things that you can coach through with guys like that. So, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, this was one that really was over when Ron Bellamy got hired. Bellamy had a big part in getting this one done. Michigan State was kind of the other school. So this was really kind of a head-to-head win for Michigan against Michigan State. And, but yeah, no, East Detroit, again, playing against some different he's not playing against the Kings, the Castex, that type of thing. So competition, a little questionable, but I think that actually bodes well for him because he's looked good in other arenas as well.
Almost mid-April, so we have the 6 commits right now. But when I look at the message boards and look at my emails, it seems like there's a lot of angst with Michigan fans as to why we haven't landed a quarterback. And it seems like every time a quarterback goes off the board or commits, our fans get nervous. But who is left out there, or who do you know that we are really interested in at that position? I
mean, right now, as things stand today, there's really like one guy. They offered a kid a few weeks ago named Alex Orji out of, was it Saxe? I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, out in Texas. Okay. Both his brothers play at Vanderbilt, but he actually just committed to Virginia Tech like 4 or 5 days ago. Kid named Nate Johnson out of Fresno, California, Clovis West. It's actually a school Michigan's recruited in the past. Our own Sam Webb did a really good interview about a month and a half or 2 months ago with his quarterback's coach, who kind of compared him to Denard, but thinks he can be a better passer. Then compared him to Denard Robinson athletically, but thinks he can be a better passer. That's from just an athletic standpoint, Michigan fans know that's a pretty lofty comparison, one that I was kind of like, okay, but to be fair, last weekend in his game, he posted a couple of videos. He had one run, and it wasn't a pass, but it was a run that definitely had he can go. There's no doubt about that. So the way I'm looking at it right now, this guy, Nate Johnson, he's already set an official. To me, he's the clear number one target right now for Michigan. He's really the only guy they're heavily recruiting. There's still the kid named Taven Jackson out of Indianapolis who actually didn't put Michigan in his top group, but did tell our Bryce Marich last weekend that Michigan is still recruiting him and that he's still considering him. I wouldn't put him much into that. Basically, long story short, there's really Nate Johnson far and away the top target right now. I think the thought process is that you have Dante Moore, the Detroit King kid in 23, the next cycle, who looks like he really might be the best quarterback in that class. He's the best in-state quarterback. I mean, I wouldn't even know. Maybe you would even know better, Mike. But Moore is one of the best in-state quarterbacks in the last 15 years, 20 years. Got to be. Devin Gardner was really highly recruited. Maybe that's the last guy is Devin Gardner, right? But so you have Moore in the 23 class, which grew up a Michigan fan, is going to be the top target. Has been the top target. They offered him it's literally been 3 years almost since they offered this kid. I think the thought process in 22 is that you can roll the dice on a kid like Nate Johnson, who has the physical tools to be a true dual threat guy. I also think Matt Weiss, the new quarterbacks coach, he's helped coach Lamar Jackson before. I think he sees the opportunity to take a player in that mold and build him into something. That's the way I look at it. So you have McCarthy in 21 was a 5-star, your top target. You have a guy in 23 who's he's definitely one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in that class. He's one that I think we have him ranked 11th overall, regardless of position, 5-star. I think in 22 they look at a kid like Nate Johnson and think this is because he's like at 85 or 86. He doesn't have a ton of great offers. He's got a few, but nothing super special. Michigan far and away his best offer on paper. I think they look at it as sort of like they looked at Dan Villari at the time in 20, although if you remember the whole J.D. Johnson thing, they kind of had to make a last-minute move there. Mm-hmm. I think they look at Nate Johnson as a high-ceiling kind of kid worth taking a chance on, and then you throw all your chips at Dante Moore in the 23 cycle. So with McCarthy already on campus, first-year guy, I don't think quarterback – you always want to take one, obviously, but between the portal, of which the portal is not going away anytime soon, and especially at quarterback. But between the portal and the fact you have a 5-star in 21 and your top guy in 23 is an in-state 5-star who grew up a Michigan fan, I wouldn't be super concerned about what direction they go in 22 at quarterback. And I do think Nate, I just feel like he's going to end up being the guy. Nobody's put in a crystal ball yet, but it just feels like Michigan, they're recruiting him really hard. I think he feels like a big priority for them. And like I said, they're by far his best offer on paper. It just feels like something – when he comes up in June for the official, I feel like there's a really good chance that he may join the class.
Does Michigan have anything planned? I know the barbecue at the Big House was always such a huge thing in the past, and of course getting kids on campus. Anything that we know of yet, or are we on hold as far as that goes?
No, so right now there's 3 weekends in June. They're in a row. It's the 11th through the 13th, the 18th through the 20th, and the 25th through the 27th. I'm trying to think of what the number is. It's somewhere around 15 or 16 official visits that they have locked in, provided, right? I mean, we have to wait to see if it's official. I think it's going to be. I mean, we're going on almost 18 months now of kids not being able to, visit campus. Yeah. And when they come to campus on their own, this is the stupidest rule, by the way. When a kid comes to campus on his own, they are not allowed to have any contact with the staff, even on the phone, in person, whatever. But they can't call the coaches while they're in Ann Arbor. So if a kid goes up on his own, Michigan basically has to create a checklist almost for them to just do it on their own. Mm-hmm. They can call them if they're at home, but they can't call them on the phone if they're in Ann Arbor. It's so stupid. But so they've done a good job of setting these up for if and when this goes official. The 18th, the weekend of the 18th is kind of their big weekend. They're calling it Victor's Weekend. I want to say there's double-digit kids will be on campus that weekend for sure. A lot of big names too, like Walter Nolan, the 5-star defensive tackle out of Cordova, Tennessee. He'll be up there. Just Josh Josephs out of Georgia, their top edge guy. And they have a ton of kids that are coming up that weekend. So they've done a good – at first it felt like they were being a little tentative about trying to set these visits. I don't know what they were waiting for. They did kind of reverse course and then got aggressive with it, and I think it was the right thing to do because I think with these 22 kids, you think about it, so there's been no contact period as far as like coaches can't see them, they can't go to campuses, talk to the coaches, meet the staff, do all that stuff. But communication lines, there's been no dead period. So these kids, more than almost any recruiting cycle, have been getting bombarded with the phone calls, the text messages, the Twitter DMs, all that. They've been getting this like for 18 months straight. I think June, Michigan and just nationally, I think kids are going to commit to programs. June's going to be an insane month just for that reason alone. I think kids are going to start to go see schools and they're going to say, okay, I'm done. This is where I want to go. Finally got to see it. I'm tired of getting phone calls from 20 staffs 5 times a day. Like, I'm done. So I think it was the right move. But yeah, 18th through the 20th, Victor's weekend. That'd be the weekend to watch. I mean, we have a list on our site. People can go. It's updated right now. I just added a couple guys this morning. Can go there at any time and check it out.
Well, Steve, when you look at who we have offered in this class of 2022 on 24/7 Sports, a lot of really high-level kids. And as you said, June's probably going to be a huge month, a watershed month. Of the kids we have out there, any that you sure that are leaning or have gone from warm to ready to commit to Michigan?
I think there are a couple guys. Nate Johnson actually kind of quietly being one. Dylan Tatum, I think, is another guy. Wes Bloomfield was interesting. Ron Bellamy got hired, but was receivers coach, his former head coach, high school at West Bloomfield, obviously. Consensus at the time was like, well, he's definitely going to go to Michigan. Like, his former head coach is on staff. We already thought he might have liked Michigan a little bit more than everyone else anyway. Well, his comment right off the bat was, he's not really going to be my position coach, so how much does it really matter to me that he's on staff or whatever? Well, then he got shifted to safeties coach, and that's the position Michigan was kind of like really kind of liked him at. Michigan State has tried to make that one a battle. I think they've done a pretty good job of doing so, but that's one especially I feel like is tough. That'd be a tough loss if Michigan lost that. They have so many things going in their favor. I want to say his girlfriend goes to Michigan, right? I mean, that's which kids are kids, but still, like, that is one of those little things that can matter. Just feels like there's so many little things that point in Michigan's direction. So that's one. Another guy, I think we've probably talked about him at this point a lot, is Tyler Morris, the receiver out of Nazareth Academy, same high school that J.J. McCarthy went to before he transferred to IMG.
Right.
Notre Dame has been pushing hard there. I'd be interested. I'd love to hear a phone call between Michigan and Tyler Morris if Notre Dame comes up, because Notre Dame had kind of backed off there for a while, but they've missed on so many of their receiver targets that they're kind of coming back around. And you wonder if Michigan's saying, like, we've been here the whole time, type deal. But to Notre Dame's credit, they went to the playoffs. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to go to Notre Dame still, in that regard. So that is still one, though. I know our own Josh Newkirk was just out there last weekend, actually, watched Morris live, and he put in a crystal ball. I've had one in for a long time. I think that there's a few of us on the site have had one in for a really long time. Feels like a kid. That'd be another one. To me, even though he's an out-of-state kid, you got the McCarthy connection and the fact that Michigan has prioritized him from day one and has never wavered. Feels like a guy that would be a disappointment if Michigan didn't get. So that's another one. I know another guy we've talked a lot about who things are kind of heating up again a little bit is Jaden Gould out of Bergen Catholic out in New Jersey, right? Another, to me, similar to Will Johnson in that safety size, but really has the ability to play cornerback and national recruit. I think he's set officials to USC and Penn State for sure. I believe a Michigan official will be set very soon. Things had quieted there for a while, but it still feels like Michigan's all in on that one. He's another one Michigan's led the crystal ball for quite a while. And I think that would be it'd be one that would be viewed as Michigan let that one get away if he ended up elsewhere, just because, and again, these are just the minutia of like covering recruiting, but like he tweeted something about like Michigan hockey when they won a game, like tweeted about being pumped about Michigan hockey. And it was like, what kid who's not committed has ever tweeted about Michigan hockey,
Yeah.
as a football recruit, right? Like, that's not common. So little things like that where you're kind of like, okay, there's almost no doubt this kid's got to be favoring Michigan. So yeah, I think I said from a perception standpoint, I think it'd be kind of viewed as getting away a little bit. As far as other guys, trying to think of some other ones, I think they're still trying or going to try with Damani Jackson, the USC commit, the kid out of Mater Dei, the 5-star. I think he's one of the 2 or 3 best players in the country. He almost committed to Michigan when he came. He did come up on his own last fall. To almost commit after watching that game against Wisconsin would have been impressive for a recruit, right? I mean, because he almost did. And him and Will Johnson are very tight. And if official visits are if they open up, which again we're fully expecting them to, it's just a matter of when right now, not if. I think if he takes other officials, I do think he'll visit Michigan. I don't know if it will result in anything, but he was really working hard on Will Johnson to commit to USC after he committed to USC, and that was really, matter of fact, actually, when Will Johnson did make his verbal, I'd argue that USC actually finished second and Ohio State finished third. I mean, that's how tight the two of those guys are. So, he grew up a Michigan fan. He's from Youngstown, Ohio, actually. His dad's a diehard Michigan fan. He seems pretty locked into USC, but he's the level of recruit that if you have an in like that, I mean, Michigan's going to keep going. I mean, there's just no reason for him not to. At least maybe USC has a rough season. Maybe Michigan doesn't. Like, there's just so many reasons to keep recruiting a kid like that because, I mean, you talk about a year one guy. We were joking. We joked on our recruiting podcast that he would have played for Michigan last year. They could have used him. The coaches probably talked to him after the Wisconsin game and said, we could have played you, on the field. Like, that's how A, how good he is, and how B, how much it at least appears that Michigan needs some help at the cornerback spot. So again, not a lean at all. I mean, he's committed elsewhere, but a kid I think they're still going to push on.
Well, as we know, we've heard a lot of talk about how young this new coaching staff is, or the new coaches on staff, I should say. Has that changed in any way the way Michigan is recruiting or their approach?
Big time. I mean, it's in the areas that you would have expected, in the aggressiveness, the energy, the ability to connect. I think the biggest thing is, I don't even mean this negatively, or this isn't disparaging or anything, but just the difference in recruiting in the way that Mo Linguist recruits versus the way that Mike Zordich recruited. It's a 180. And I say that as like Mike Zordich, you could argue for 3 or 4 years there was the best position assistant Michigan had on their staff. I mean, you see all the Brandon Watson's still on an active NFL roster right now, right? I mean, like the guys that he helped produce there, I mean, he did such an amazing job. But from a recruiting standpoint, maybe a little lackluster, right? I mean, they especially the last few cycles that they really haven't gotten the caliber. They haven't really recruited an Ambry Thomas or a Lavert Hill or a David Long the last few cycles. Linguist has come in. Well, I mean, he got 2 4-star kids to commit 2 weeks after he took the job without them ever. They probably didn't really know anything about Michigan. But right? I mean, because the last staff wasn't recruiting them at all, and they wouldn't have. We wouldn't even know who Cody Jones was if Linguist hadn't been hired. Like, Don Brown's staff would have never offered that kid, even though he was obviously more than capable of playing at Michigan. So, the energy is a 180. I think really, though, in a way, even though it's the youth, obviously youth brings energy, it brings aggressiveness on the recruiting trail, but the ability to connect, I think, has been maybe even a bigger thing. George Hilo has been a nice addition in that regard. I think, he was only at Maryland for 1 year. Maryland, not really they recruit pretty well, but hard to know coming from Maryland as really he was a special teams linebackers guy. I think he's been a pleasant surprise. Not that we didn't think he could do it, just there wasn't a lot known about him before he got hired. Same thing with Mike McDonald. Ron Bellamy, too. I mean, Bellamy has the early looks to me of a Chris Partridge type hire from the recruiting standpoint, maybe like weird, even though Partridge finished tops in 17, maybe weirdly has a higher ceiling, because the one thing we've noticed about Bellamy, he commands a ton of respect in state. Talked about the Tayshaun Trent recruitment, Dylan Tatum. Bellamy's a guy that's very, very well respected by other high school coaches in state. I don't know if we'd ever there's always been conversation, was Michigan not doing their due diligence in the city? are they letting guys that they shouldn't? Are they letting them slip through the cracks? Are they not really making Detroit area a big enough priority? Whatever. With Bellamy, I don't expect that to be the case anymore. I think in a lot of ways, unless Michigan State really goes back to what they were in D'Antonio's golden era there, Michigan should be able to get most of the guys they want out of those areas going forward. That's my opinion. We'll see. But as far as guys they really want, between Bellamy, Mike Hart has experience recruiting in state. Sharon Moore was the point guy in state when they tried to kind of start to turn things around a little bit. Same with Josh Gaddis. So now you kind of have four guys who have pretty good experience recruiting in state. But Bellamy's also got connections. He's one of the reasons they're in it with Walter Nolan. He either, I don't know, he coached with he knows the high school coach. He's another guy that just seems to have a lot of connections throughout the country. He's from Louisiana, so he's got ties down south and stuff. So, really high ceiling there. But I think the biggest thing has been that ability to connect. Sharon Moore at offensive line. I mean, Moore is their best recruiter last cycle. He helped them sign a 5-star safety out of Oklahoma and a 4-star corner out of California. He was a tight ends coach. That usually means you're a pretty good recruiter when you're beating Alabama for a 5-star safety out of Oklahoma. That's just, with Daxton Hill. And so, Moore, same thing with Warner, where it's Warner did get a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, Michigan's got more talent in the offensive line room than they've had in a long time, but they also did miss on some pretty big names over the last cycles. They were so close to having elite offensive lineman recruiting. I think Moore gives them a better chance to recruit and to win some of those battles. The coaching, we'll see. And that's not really something we're talking that much about. But either way, I think, the youth, the energy, the aggressiveness, and the ability to connect have really kind of gone the other way. Now it just matters. None of that stuff matters, though, if you go 500, right? I mean, that's the second piece of the puzzle now is we'll see how they do on the field, see how it allows them to finish this cycle.
Well, and a final question then for you, Steve. As we know, spring ball ended on Saturday with a scrimmage, a practice, whatever you like to call it. And, I've noticed...
Did they do something?
Yeah, they just...
I didn't even know.
It was just a practice, and, I kept seeing the tweets and the Facebook messages from folks who were there. I think it was limited to family, maybe 2 people. I'm not sure exactly, but there were pictures I saw of it, the all yellow uniforms, all blue uniforms. But yeah, they picked teams and they had their last practice. Not even knowing that there was a practice, a lot of people don't. And that means the hype machine wasn't quite what it usually is this time of the year with spring ball. It was a bit subdued. But any stories that you've heard emanating from practice about this guy or that guy improving or surprising in the last 6 weeks?
A few, yeah. They tweeted a picture and then a photo gallery. That's it. I just think there's such a disconnect between the fans and the program right now. I think it's kind of sad. I get trying to keep things under wraps. Well, actually, I don't. I don't really think there's much competitive advantage gained by not allowing fans into a practice or more than a 30-second Twitter video that you don't really see anything. It's just half-second clips of people running. But that's a whole nother topic. Yeah, so I think Blake Corum has a really good chance to make a big impact at running back this year. Haskins, obviously the guy, but I think a really good 1-2 combo there. I do think other guys will get in. Donovan Edwards has gotten a lot of really good praise, but I wouldn't sleep on Dunlap either, the other freshman they brought in who enrolled early. Offensive line, Trevor Keegan, who I don't know what took them so long to put him on the field last year. I mean, they put him in. If people go back and watch, he came in against Penn State, and I want to say he had 2 pancakes in the first 5 plays that he was in there. I mean, just total upgrade over what they had. I think he's kind of seized that left guard job. Looks like a potential difference maker. Defensively, Mozzie Smith has kind of stepped up, which is good news. I still think that if there's one position that they'll try to find somebody in the portal this spring, still it'll be in the interior of the defensive line for sure. That would be number one. Daxton Hill looks like a 5-star type guy, at safety this year. I think people should expect more from him than they got last year. I think really, they have a coach at safety now. As you remember last year, Rob Shoup was like, it's like now they actually have a guy who's coaching them. I think that'll help, because many think that Brad Hawkins will have a rebound year because he had a very rough 2020. A lot of guys did. I mean, there's just no way around it. Really the big question right now is, was 2020 just an aberration, a hiccup, or is it more indicative of like where this is going? I don't expect them to play below 500 football next year, but we don't really know what the ceiling is either, And so, yeah, I mean, those are a few guys. I think Cade McNamara probably has a safe lead at quarterback also right now anyway, which he's healthy. Like it's the other thing too, because Joe Milton, who obviously he's left, he's gone, but I mean, he really was hurt last year. Like they've had like such bad luck in keeping their quarterbacks healthy for whatever reason, and McNamara appears to be 100%. And is a guy that, like I said, even until he led that comeback against Rutgers, I don't think people realize he had Alabama, Notre Dame, USC. I mean, he was a really highly recruited quarterback. I mean, I think people were, and I mean, I'd say myself included, McCarthy had all the hype. Maybe he'd come right in the spring and take it. But I think it's doing a little bit of a disservice to McNamara, who I know the players respect as a leader. So far, it feels like he's kind of gaining some traction in that regard. But as a guy who was no slouch on the recruiting trail in his own right. Yeah, he didn't have the high ranking, but I mean, he legit had some of the best programs in the country. He was committed to Notre Dame, decommitted to Notre Dame, and then committed to Michigan. It's not like, and he threw for 1 billion yards in high school. I mean, there are a lot of things about him as far as the high school profile goes that point towards success at the college level. So feels like he's comfortably in control right now there. But yeah, I think to me the biggest questions remain defensive line, linebacker, who's going to step up at linebacker. There's a lot of young talent. Junior Colson could be a year one guy. I think that's a possibility right now. Corner, right? Everyone worried about corner. I think that's another area. If they found the right guy in the portal, I think they'd go in that direction. So, most of the questions are defensively. The new scheme sounds encouraging. I think they're going to have a hard time stopping the run. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. I do think they're capable. I think you'll see them. People would know in big games with Don Brown. I think it became a deal where, like, I don't know if it always felt like this, but it felt like they would get pressure, but it was always just a half a second slow, right? Like, how many passes it seemed like they gave up were like, if the quarterback had held on for a quarter second. It's like I think of Penn State. I think of Mac Jones in the bowl game where it's like it felt like Michigan was just almost there like about 15 times, and then he'd just drop it off, and Jerry Jeudy would run like 138 yards for a touchdown. Yeah. And I feel like they think that they are going to be able to actually produce more in that regard from a sack and like a QB pressure standpoint. So that can change everything for you if you're doing that right, and the other thing too, I know they put a big emphasis on, not that any defensive staff doesn't, but the one other weird kind of quirky thing about Don Brown's defenses, even when they were in 16, like when they were one of the top 5 units in the country in almost every statistical category, one thing he's never really shown to do, this was at Boston College too, never been anywhere near the top in the country as far as forcing turnovers. Michigan's turnover margin has always been very, very mediocre, if not poor. Nothing's a guarantee. This isn't hype. I don't really know what Michigan's going to do this season, but I do think they feel like they can create more turnovers defensively. And that's one of those things where, a couple turnovers in a game that maybe you're not favored can win you the game, right? And so there is that. But lots of question marks. I feel like the offense, if the offense doesn't perform this year, I think it'd be a massive disappointment. Their running back, I think top to bottom, they have the best running back group in the Big Ten, top to bottom. Don't think Haskins is the best back himself, but I think Blake Corum's probably the best number 2 back in the conference. And I think that Donovan Edwards is a guy that in most other seasons would probably be that number 2 guy, if not come right out and play right away. Right. And at receiver, even with Giles Jackson leaving, I think Cornelius Johnson, Andrell Anthony, another true freshman, had a really good spring. I don't know if that means anything in the fall yet. But between Cornelius Johnson, Ronnie Bell, who's their most productive player, coming back. Roman Wilson, who quietly had a pretty good freshman season. I mean, they have a lot of talent at the skill positions. It's going to be up to the offensive line to kind of create opportunities for these guys to make plays, because I think there's so much talent on that, and pretty much everyone's coming back. This isn't a whole new group. There's a lot of guys that are returning from last year. So I think there's a lot of pressure on the offensive line to produce, because, if this group can't score points or can't sustain drives or whatever, then with Gaddis, I just don't know. It's just year 3, and I think there's more than enough talent there to put up some points and give defenses a lot of problems.
I think it is going to happen. I think last year was an aberration. It was a grueling 6 games to watch, no doubt.
Yep.
But
I think they gave up. I think there was a lot of giving up. I think it's another reason why the coaching staff was overhauled. I think the culture is something I think Harbaugh realized needed a change. The big question with that is, was it too late? I think that's the only, as far as that goes, I think that's the big $1 million question is, was it too late? And so I think we'll find out this year if maybe we'll find the answer to that question this year, maybe not, but either way, the changes that were made, I think, were indicative of more than just recruiting even. I think they needed it. I think they want a different energy, a different culture in the locker room too.
Here with us on our Game Day segment this week with our monthly recruiting update and more has been Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. And Steve, as we've been mentioning during the course of our conversation, recruiting and commitments is going to really step up and maybe, as we mentioned, big time as far as commitments in June. So we will get you back on soon and see what's happening.
Yeah, of course, Mike, as always.
On Quick Hits today, Eli Brooks is coming back for a 5th year. He made his decision public on Wednesday. I've always liked Eli, and his return will be welcome with so many young, new faces on next year's team. Softball defeated Michigan State 6-1 on Wednesday at home in a makeup game. Megan Bobian pitched the first 3 innings, and Alex Staraka the last 4. She got the win and picked up her 11th against 2 losses. Maryland will be in town for a weekend series of 4 games beginning on Friday. We are 17-4 heading into play this weekend. Baseball returns to action this weekend with a 3-game series up in Minnesota starting Friday at 3 p.m. The game will be broadcast live on ESPNU. Michigan will play a pair on Saturday and Sunday. Both games will begin at 1 p.m. Central Time and be streamed live on Big Ten Network Plus. Michigan is 15-7 in Big Ten play, entering this weekend's action. Thanks again to Steve Lorenz for being with us on this week's show. We expect recruiting to really pick up in June, so we'll be sure to get Steve back on soon with another update. That does it for another week, though. Thanks for taking time from your busy schedule to join us. Make sure you tell your Michigan family and friends about the show, and tune in again next week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!